Imagine going on a date with someone so obsessed with cleanliness, they make you shower the second you step inside their house. And that's before things take a really dark turn. Get cozy, as tonight we have many scary stories from the well. Like and subscribe, and let's begin. My Tinder date made me take a shower in front of her. There was no bio on Ruth's profile, only pictures, and within a handful of messages, she'd asked me over to her place. Straight out of the gate, that was 2 red flags, but she swore she wasn't a catfish, so I suggested we grab a cheeky pint first. That way, if a hairy biker dude turned up and made kissy faces at me, I could make a speedy getaway through the fire exit. Ruth looked like a Greek goddess in her thigh-high skirt and trench coat. She had these stunning onyx eyes and almost seemed to glow in the dinky little pub. Every time she tossed her hair, the other drinkers stole glances in the back bar mirror. She looked different from the photos, sure, but still leagues above me. I went for a hug, which she redirected into a firm handshake. Ruth wore thick winter gloves even though the fireplace in the corner was roaring. As I caught a trace of her scent, fresh and lovely, a sensible voice at the back of my mind screamed, "What's the catch?" Surely any second now, she'd trick me into emptying my bank account. Crap, maybe she'd already swiped my credit card. I patted my pockets, wallet, phone, Pokemon keychain. Nope, all there. Already the marshal waving that 3rd red flag was a speck in the rearview mirror. The bartender took our orders. I asked for a pint of Guinness, whereas Ruth stuck with tap water. Then we eased into a conversation about our lives. When I started telling her about life in the IT game, she yawned sarcastically. Chuckling, I said, "Well, what do you do then?" "I'm between jobs." "Between what and what?" "Between surgeon and anything that doesn't involve bodily fluids." "Huh, I thought they might have warned you about those in medical school." "I didn't always have a problem with them. There was a traumatizing experience." She shuddered as if reliving a painful memory. "Anyway, let's talk about your sex life." Caught off guard, I spat a mouthful of Guinness all over the counter. An agitated Ruth grabbed a wet wipe from her pocket, cleared the mess, and then readjusted the placemats and ashtray so everything aligned perfectly. The ginger bartender side-eyed her, but said nothing. The beautiful brunette told me she had a bunch of kinks, and I'd be lying if I told you my heart didn't flutter a little. She asked whether I was ready for another drink. I was, although I took small, steady sips because I never could handle my alcohol. Any more than 4 pints usually resulted in me clinging onto the toilet bowl like a life raft. Finally, I just came out with what was nagging at me. "Ruth, don't take this the wrong way, but are you real? Like, what's the catch here? Am I gonna wake up tomorrow missing a kidney?" That made her chuckle. "I'll be honest, there is a catch. I'll tell you if you promise not to make fun of me." I crossed my heart. She leaned close, pushed her pouty lips right up against my ear, and said, "I'm a clean freak, like a major clean freak. If you come back to my place tonight, I need you to wash yourself the second we get there." As her gloved finger ran along my shirt collar, she fought the urge to retch. "Those clothes will need cleaned too. I've got a fresh pair you can borrow, and you must brush your teeth. Also, have you got an earwax remover with you? If not, you can borrow one from my emergency kit." I asked whether she was serious. "Deadly. I absolutely cannot stand filth. I need you spotless. Sound good?" A winning lottery ticket had blown into my hand. I finished my pint in one long gulp, wiped away my foam mustache, and said, "Sounds great." In the front seat of her Volvo, Ruth handed me a breath mint, probably because a trace of my aunt's famous cottage pie lingered on my breath. She drove west out of town toward an ultra-modern house standing against the forest. The straight angles of the white building looked odd juxtaposed against the pine trees, and there was an angular barrier around back keeping the vermin at bay. The sterile stench of disinfectant stung my nostrils the second we stepped through the front door. Everything was meticulously organized, all straight lines and spotless, like something from an IKEA catalog. You could have performed open-heart surgery in any room. There wasn't a single piece of furniture not covered in plastic, and 2 stuffed kittens batting invisible strings stood guard on the downstairs landing. "Aren't they cute?" Ruth asked when she noticed me staring. It's like she occupied an alternative, shrink-wrapped universe. She made me kick off my shoes, then I followed her to the end of the hall. Standing in the middle of the bathroom, she watched as I stripped off. Her neutral expression stung. She grabbed my clothes into a zip-locked bag, which she held away from herself like radioactive waste, and then she provided clear instructions about which soap and shampoo I needed to use. I bit down on the temptation to tell her I'd been washing myself for years. Sarcasm is probably what kept me single for so long, and stepped into the shower. Ruth left a white linen shirt and a pair of jeans folded neatly over the towel rack. The earwax remover on the edge of the sink operated like something out of Star Trek. I figured out the settings eventually, though. In the lounge, she handed me a shot of something fruity and sour. We clinked glasses and drank. The liquid burned on the way down. I went to sit on the sofa, but the plastic made it slicker than a water slide. I fell to the ground, and before I could pick myself up, my head got heavy and the air became stale. What happened next is a blur. 1 minute the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Next, I'm flat on my back. My legs were stuck. Alcohol was sloshing around the pit of my stomach, and breathing was borderline impossible. I made myself look down. A surprisingly difficult process. Past the end of the bed, Ruth rose into view, a mean-spirited grin on her face. She was encasing my legs with shrink wrap like an Egyptian mummy, gradually working her way north. I opened my mouth. No words came out. "Shh, this won't take long," she said. She swung her leg over my midsection, straddling me. Then she leaned forward and pushed her lips against my ear. "Don't worry, I'm gonna take care of you. You look so handsome, all lovely and spotless. I'm just making sure you stay that way, forever." Her tongue probed the inside of my ear, and then she went to fetch medical equipment from the corner of the room. My brain couldn't piece the mess together, but I knew I needed to get out of there. Fast. I tried flexing my leg muscles, but lacked the strength. Ruth's arms clamped tight around my ankles. "Stop, you're messing everything up." With all the energy I could summon, I thrashed from side to side till I fell off the bed. The wooden floor hit worse than concrete. I opened my mouth to groan, but instead a great flood of vomit shot out, as if launched by a supercharged sprinkler. Chunks of cottage pie flew in every direction. A fountain of half-digested beef mince, onions, carrots, and garlic. Ruth rushed over to restrain me, but I rolled away, and as I did, her shoes skidded through the rancid contents of my stomach, and she fell. The germaphobe popped right back up. She looked at her palms, then the wet patches all down her back, and then her throat made this strangled sound like a cat hacking up a fur ball. She grabbed a set of wet wipes and started scrubbing herself clean, furiously. Sensing an opportunity to escape, I crawled away like a worm, leaving behind a snail trail of barf. "Get back here," Ruth screamed. She physically couldn't stop scrubbing her hands long enough to come after me. I crawled down the hall, around a bend. At one point I needed to use the crown of my head to force a door open. The entire time I was coughing and trying to keep that morning's breakfast from creeping up in my throat. Soon, I was conscious enough to realize my left arm was free, whereas the right was pinned against my torso. To my left was the kitchen. Maybe there was a sharp object there I could cut the shrink wrap with. I fumbled towards a central island, crawled up the side, and pulled on a drawer. Cutlery fell all around me with a series of metal clangs, followed by the drawer. My free hand dug through the pile for a knife, finding only spoons. Finally, I grabbed a fork and stabbed at the wrap till my other arm came free. I was like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Footsteps came shuffling toward the kitchen. Freeing my legs would take way too long. They still only had a few inches of wiggle room. I would be at Ruth's mercy. Just then, something rancid slid up my throat, so I opened my mouth and spat a fat, sticky oyster of what had once been scrambled eggs and bacon, but now looked like an alien life form, into my palm. The beautiful psycho burst through the door. In her hand was a syringe. She launched herself on top of me. My left hand caught her forearm at the last possible second, while the right smeared my biological weapon across her face. As the vomit omelet dripped from her cheek in fat glops, she released the needle and went into furious convulsions. Quickly, I rolled on top of her, grabbed the fallen drawer, and bashed her across the side of the skull. I did this until her eyes rolled back. Then I crawled away on my elbows. In the hall, there was a phone on top of the side table. I punched in 999. The operator couldn't understand me, but sent a squad car anyway. I remember telling myself to stay awake in case my kidnapper recovered, but here my memory jump cuts to a circle of emergency responders staring down at me. The officers had a hard time believing my story. A concussed Ruth said I went crazy and attacked her. On the way to the station, they took us to the hospital to patch up our cuts and bruises. Everybody seemed to believe I was the aggressor until the police searched the area surrounding the house. In the forest, they spotted a pack of rats scurrying around some bushes, and beneath it, there was a body, partially buried, badly decomposed, and wrapped in plastic. A post-mortem confirmed it was the corpse of a local man who disappeared 6 months earlier. I'd seen his mother crying on TV. There were holes in the crotch and left arm of his shrink-wrap prison, where they believed a catheter and IV drip had been inserted so Ruth could keep the poor guy alive, but in a state which prevented him from contaminating her perfect house. Ruth is denying any wrongdoing. Hopefully, the prosecutors get their act together soon, although I'm told it could take a year before sentencing. Wheels of justice and all that. I'm still on the road to recovery, mentally speaking, but I'm ready to start looking for love again, except this time, I'll be careful not to ignore any red flags. Have you seen that creepy TikTok trend where people hide in their homes and pop out to scare their loved ones? Well, my wife took it way too far, and now I'm not sure what's scarier, the trend itself or her reaction to it. My wife is participating in a viral TikTok trend. She's taking it too far. "Oh, that's so creepy," my wife Anna shouted. "I know, right? One of my coworkers sent it to me," Lori said, her attention stuck to the screen. They locked eyes, malicious smirks inching across their faces. "Want to try it?" "Definitely," Lori replied as the sisters shifted their focus to me. I'm kind of scared to ask, but what are you trying exactly?" Whenever those two got together, they were capable of some real mischief, and oftentimes it came at my expense. "You'll see," Anna said, handing me her phone. I furrowed my brows as I sank into the couch. I hesitantly glanced down at the screen, unsure if this was part of the ruse. A TikTok video was playing on repeat. A woman was on screen, her long, brown hair partially obscuring her features from view. A wide smile was plastered across her face. That alone was creepy, but the way she was standing, it was off-putting. The video cut on several occasions, and each time it did, the woman was in a different spot in the house, hiding behind curtains, crouching under the table, standing on the stairs. All the while, that same manic grin never left her lips, not even once. The man filming was getting audibly more freaked out with every encounter. I kept waiting for some sort of punchline. I thought that eventually the woman would break the facade and return to her normal self, but she never did. The video ended with a close-up of the woman's bulging eyes as she lunged at the camera and a guttural shriek from the man filming. Once it was over, I hurriedly swiped off the video and breathed a sigh of relief. "Whew, okay, I see what you're..." I froze. It was only then that I noticed it. Anna and Lori were gone. They must have walked away at some point during the video. My heart dropped into my stomach. I really didn't like this trend, but I had a feeling that I was about to witness it firsthand. "Anna, Lori, come on, you know I hate this kind of stuff," I shouted, tentatively entering the kitchen. My eyes immediately fell to a pair of feet sticking out from beneath the curtains. I pursed my lips, marching up to the window. I ripped the drapes aside to find Lori standing there, smiling up at me. "Oh, I'm shaking. So scary," I huffed, crossing my arms. Lori held her pose for about 5 more seconds before she couldn't contain her giggles any longer. "Haha, okay, you got me. I admit, that wasn't as funny as I thought it'd be," she grinned, covering her mouth. "Believe me, I know. Let's go find your sister." Lori nodded, following behind me. "Anna, I found Lori. Time to come out now." I received no response. Lori and I continued to scour my home, searching up and down for my wife. Once I reached the top step, I saw it. The door to our room was slightly ajar, leaving a thin, inviting sliver of darkness. I can't explain why, but something about it sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if Anna had wanted me to find her. The whole thing felt wrong. I took a deep breath, mustering all of my courage, and pushed open the door. I nearly screamed once I laid eyes on the scene that awaited me. Anna was standing in the middle of the room. The only light illuminating her features was that seeping in from behind me and the muffled rays trickling in through the curtains. The middle of the room, where my wife was lurking, was drenched in darkness. Anna stood there, still as a statue, her jet black hair partially obscuring her eyes. Even through the shadows, I could see a nauseatingly wide smile stuck to her lips. My heart jackhammered against my chest, and beads of sweat began to form atop my brow. For the first time in our 12 years of marriage, I was terrified of my wife. I flipped on the light switch, careful not to take my eyes off her. Anna, I found you. You can stop now. She completely ignored me. I only knew that she was still breathing by the slight rise and fall of her chest. The silence was deafening. Any luck finding her yet? Lori asked, snatching me from my stupor as she reached the top step. Yeah, I did, I replied, weakly pointing to Anna's motionless form. Lori marched right up to her like it was nothing. Okay, Anna, fun's over. You're about to give your hubby a heart attack. My wife didn't respond. Lori tried waving her hand in front of Anna's face, to no avail. She didn't so much as blink. All right, Anna, time to give it up. You're starting to freak everyone out, Lori said, clasping her sister by the shoulders and lightly shaking her. Anna slowly turned toward Lori, and their eyes locked. Lori gulped before taking a step back. Blood pounded in my ears. There was nothing behind those hazel irises. I didn't even recognize them anymore. Lori backed away, never breaking eye contact until she was standing directly beside me. Tim, let's go downstairs, regroup, okay? She murmured. The panic in her voice made my blood run cold. That works for me, I mumbled back. It felt as if we had to speak at a lower volume, like talking above a whisper would cause Anna to break. We crept out of the room, closing the door as we went. We'll be downstairs, Anna. It would be nice of you to join us whenever you're ready to give up on this dumb trend. Anna didn't acknowledge her. Once we made it downstairs, I took a deep breath. Lori sat on the couch, leaning forward and clutching her phone with a vice grip. What should we do, Tim? This was just supposed to be some stupid gag. Anna's always taken these things a bit too seriously, but this, I've never seen anything like it. She's really scaring me. I don't know. I've never seen her like this before either. Do you think we might be overreacting? I mean, maybe she really is just taking this a bit too far. Even I didn't believe that, but it was the only plausible explanation I could come up with. Yeah, that has to be it. Surely she'll snap out of it at some point, right? She has to. It wouldn't. The words caught in my throat. I caught Anna peeking around the corner, half of her face hidden from view. Her expression was the exact same as it had been when we left her upstairs. Lori traced my gaze until she realized who I was looking at. She instinctively backed away upon making eye contact with her sister. Tim, how long has she been standing there? Lori squeaked, shrinking into the sofa. I have no idea. We didn't even hear her walk down the stairs. The three of us sat there in silence. The tension was so thick that even a knife wouldn't cut through it. I could feel myself beginning to shake. Tim, I really hate to do this to you, Lori began, turning towards me. But I can't take this anymore. It's too much. I'm going home. Call me if there's anything I can do. And please, try to get Anna some help, if you can, she uttered, grabbing her purse. I could feel the color drain from my face. Lori, please, don't leave me alone with her. I don't know how to handle this. I'm sorry. I feel bad. Believe me, I do. But it's getting late, and my kids have school tomorrow. I shouldn't have even stayed for this long. I nodded, my bottom lip beginning to quiver. All I could muster was a weak, okay. Lori beelined for the door, straight past her immobile sister. Anna didn't even twitch. Instead, she opted to remain watching me the entire time. Once the door slammed shut, the pit in my stomach grew even deeper. I was at a loss for words. My wife and I stood there in a sickening staring match, neither of us blinking. The smile on her face never wavered. In fact, once that door shut, I could have sworn that I saw it stretch just a little bit wider. I don't know if it was the stress or the fear or Lori's sudden betrayal, but something in me snapped. This was silly. Anna was obviously still running with that stupid TikTok challenge, and I was feeding into it. Hook, line, and sinker. I started to get angry. All right, Anna, stand there for as long as you want. I don't care. When you're ready to talk about this like adults, I'll be finishing up some work on my laptop. She didn't respond. My wife just kept staring at me with that same Cheshire grin plastered to her lips. Fine by me. I was done buying into whatever she was playing at. I sank down into my armchair and picked up my laptop, careful to keep Anna in my peripheral vision. Something deep down told me that I needed to keep her in my line of sight. I opened my laptop, trying to distract myself from Anna's strange behavior by doing some research for an article I was writing, but I just couldn't seem to get it together. It's almost impossible to focus on a task when you can feel someone looking at you. I sighed. 30 minutes later, and I hadn't digested a single word of anything I'd read. This was going nowhere. I was preparing to try to communicate with my stock-still wife again when I heard it. Something near the doorway skittered across the floor. I slowly glanced up to where Anna had been standing for nearly an hour. She was gone. I strained my ears, listening for anything that might clue me in as to where she went. The only sounds that I heard were my own labored breathing and the rapid pounding of my heart. My fingers quivered. I didn't know if I had the strength to do it, but I had to know. With trembling hands, I closed the lid on my laptop, just enough to see over it. I nearly screamed as it clattered to the floor. I scrambled out of my seat and backed up until I was pressed against the wall. Anna was on all fours, frozen mid-stride. She smiled up at me, again staying still as a statue after I'd noticed her. Something instantly caught my attention. Her eyes. I'd never seen anything like them before. They were hungry, predatory, and I was their target. I failed to calm myself down as I slunk around the perimeter of the living room, careful not to break eye contact. Once I reached the stairs, I bolted up them, taking 3 at a time till I reached the top landing. I burst into our room, slammed the door shut, and made sure that it was locked. I was safe, or so I thought. What the hell is going on? This is insane, I said out loud, patting my pockets to try and find my phone. A sickening realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. I'd left it on the coffee table when I was working on my laptop. We didn't have a landline either. I was trapped. I began to hyperventilate and pace around the room. What was I supposed to do? My car keys were in the bowl downstairs, so even if I was able to climb out of the window, I'd have to go back inside to get them. Running to a neighbor's house was out of the question. We lived on a secluded road, and we didn't even know the nearest people to us. In the end, I concluded that I had no other option but to try to sleep it off and hope that my wife was back to normal in the morning. I slipped into a t-shirt and gym shorts before lying in my bed. I knew that I probably wasn't going to get a wink of sleep, but I had to give it a shot. It was the only thing I could do. I turned the lamp off, and the room was bathed in darkness, aside from the faint yellow glow trickling in from underneath the door. Right before I closed my eyes, I noticed something that ensured I was wide awake. I could barely make out someone's feet blocking the light. I shuddered. How long had she been standing there? I didn't want to know the answer. I suddenly heard the doorknob begin to jiggle. My heart raced like a piston, and I could feel all the blood rush from my face. How could I have forgotten? I keep a spare key stashed on top of the door frame for emergencies. This was it. I was cornered. The door slowly creaked open. I could see the glimmer of Anna's stark white teeth through the opening. Her eyes were bloodshot, and rightfully so. I hadn't seen her blink once. I couldn't move a muscle. I was paralyzed with fear, waiting for my wife to scamper across the floor and do God knows what to me. But she never did. I don't know how long we spent staring at each other. It must have been hours. In that entire time, her mouth didn't so much as twitch. That twisted smile remained stuck to her lips, like she was a figure in a painting. I don't know how, but eventually I must have nodded off, because when I opened my eyes again, Anna was gone. The house was pitch black, save for the moonlight shining through the downstairs windows. I could feel it. I could feel her, like a presence looming over me. Every synapse in my brain screamed at me to stay where I was, to wait it out and pray that nothing would happen. But I couldn't. I steeled my resolve, ready to fight if need be. I flipped onto my back, fully expecting to find my wife hovering over me with some sort of weapon in hand, but she wasn't there. My eyes grew wide. I hurriedly scanned the room. I didn't find her. This was my chance. I crept to the door, stifling my breathing as much as possible. The house was eerily silent. Once I made it to the stairs, I peered down them, squinting to see in the dark. The coast was clear. I tiptoed down each step, avoiding the creaky ones to the best of my ability. I felt nauseous. I could feel eyes on the back of my neck wherever I went, like I was a lamb being led to the slaughter in the supposed safety of my own home. Once I reached the bottom, I peeked around the corner to the living room. I immediately noticed something strange. The back door was hanging wide open, and the porch light was on. I drifted over to it like a moth to a flame, picking up my phone along the way. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I looked outside. Anna was sitting on her haunches, crouched over something in the yard. Her long hair prevented me from seeing what she was doing. All of the sudden, as if on instinct, she snapped her head toward me with sickening speed. When our eyes locked, I felt like I was going to pass out. My wife was holding the carcass of a dead rat. She had devoured a large chunk of it, entrails, bones, and blood oozing from the rear end. But that wasn't the worst part somehow. Even while ravaging a dead animal, Anna was still smiling. My fight or flight response kicked itself into overdrive. I slammed the back door shut and raced through the kitchen as fast as my legs would carry me, snatching my keys on the way. I shot out the door at lightning speed, not bothering to close it behind me. I leapt into the driver's seat of my Chevy and I stepped on the gas. As my truck kicked up dust, I happened to glance in the rearview mirror. I released a horrified shriek at what I saw. Anna was standing under the garage light. She watched me leave, that wide, bloody smile still plastered across her face. I don't know where I'm going. I doubt the cops will be of any help. I don't think Anna has technically done anything illegal, so their hands would probably be tied. I just had to get out of that house. I've parked at a truck stop for now until I can get my thoughts together. Even though I've made my escape, I'm still downright horrified, but not for the reasons you might think. I can't explain it, but ever since I left, I haven't been able to stop smiling. Ever find an old message from a friend that sends chills down your spine? I did, and it unearthed a twisted story about a missing friend, a gruesome murder, and a blog that reads like a confession. I found the old blog of a childhood friend who went missing in 2009. Jim was an aspiring writer. He often told me that every great storyteller opens with a setup and closes with a punchline. Well, I'm not a writer, so don't expect big things from me. I'm going to tell this tale as simply as possible. I read Jim's blog. It frightened me. 3 posts from a best friend who went missing 15 years ago. I found them yesterday. It was the anniversary of his disappearance, which seemed like the perfect day on which to nostalgically peruse our old conversations. He used to send me flurries of memes and hyperlinks. I didn't always read every message, and somehow I managed to overlook something essential from 2009. A link lost within Jim's final manic influx of messages, his private blog. Entry 1, July 6th, 2009. I just saw my next door neighbor kill his wife. That shouldn't excite me, should it? But it does, and I'll tell you why. Miss Benson frequently says that I'm a talented writer, but what use is a bright spark never seen? I need to make a mark on this fast-moving, forgetful world, and writers are remembered for stories, not words. Now, I'm only 17 years old. I haven't lived, so I haven't had stories to tell, but I've written prolifically, written until my eyes and hands have hurt. I know how to write. I just haven't known what to write. Until today. This blog may well be my magnum opus, my finest piece of literature. Don't care for my pretension. I don't care for your dismissal. You'll soon see what I see. This tale is a masterpiece, not for its prose, but its story. I finally have a story. I would like to preface the tale by clarifying that I wasn't snooping. I happened upon this bold scene, that's all. I'm not interested in the slightest about the lives of Mr. and Mrs. Ackhurst. Well, I wasn't interested. That changed 4 hours ago. Isn't it strange that the slightest happening can fundamentally alter the trajectory of human history? If Gareth weren't so bad at GTA, maybe I wouldn't have rage quit. Maybe I wouldn't have left my room to prepare a pre-midnight feast in the kitchen. And maybe I wouldn't have looked out of the window. I wouldn't have seen Mr. Ackhurst standing in the upstairs bathroom, smiling as he feverishly fed the shower head into his wife's throat. With a spare hand, he spun the tap, increasing the water flow, rapidly pumping his wife full of liquid like a flesh balloon. I am ashamed to confess that I didn't save the woman. I could have done so at any moment, but I didn't. Fear may have driven me into cowardice, perhaps, may have frozen me. By the time I woke from that terrible trance, it was all over. Mr. Ackhurst sighed, unburdening himself of the tense knot in his stomach before basking in his awful triumph. The imposing man reeled in the shower hose, removing the blood-stained shower head from his wife's throat. He cradled her body, eyeing her discolored skin and swollen, lifeless eyes. Then the spent man dragged her ragdoll form out of the room. It would have been responsible to immediately call the police. I wasn't frozen, after all. I could have moved. I could have picked up my phone and dialed 911. But if I'd done that, my story would have ended there. Mr. Ackhurst's story would have ended there, and I never would have become a writer. Not in the truest sense of the word. Not in any way that would cement my legacy, which is the only thing that matters at the end of the day. I did not alert the authorities, and I won't until I visited the house. I felt a little sick after reading that initial post. I thought back to 2009, remembering the unfortunate passing of Mrs. Ackhurst, remembering the ambulance that arrived in the night, stirring everybody in the neighborhood. But I wasn't aware of Jim's involvement in the night's horrible events, and I've barely begun to tell you about all of the awfulness that happened. The first unsettling thing worth mentioning is that the ambulance arrived on July 8th, but Jim's initial post was on July 6th. I'm reading the old conversation with my friend as I speak. July 8th. That was when we messaged each other about the ruckus on our street. Mrs. Ackhurst was definitely found on that date, which means Jim knew of her murder 2 days before anyone else. And there was more horror to come, horror that he never thought to tell me in person. He never even asked whether I read the private blog. After reading the other posts, I'm glad he didn't. Entry to July 7th, 2009. It is 3 a.m, 4 hours after I first locked eyes with the maniacal man in the window across the road. Feels as if it has been an age since I uploaded the last post. I keep thinking about Gareth. Are you reading this, friend? How long has passed? You're sleeping soundly in your bed right now, no doubt, possibly ignoring my messages, as usual. You're only a 5-minute walk away from this nightmare. 5 minutes. Sneaking out of the house without detection was no impressive feat. Not really. I didn't even bother to cover my tracks. Mom and Dad are absent even when they're home. I know my friends pity me, pity my loveless makers, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I would have never forgiven those monsters if they'd stopped me from crossing the road, entering the Ackhurst house, allowing my greatest story to unfold. As I approached the Ackhurst residence, I noticed that there were no lights in the property. My heart raced a little as I considered the possibility that Mr. Ackhurst had spotted me peeping, but I stilled myself. I knew that Mr. Ackhurst hadn't looked over at the property, hadn't seen me watching from the kitchen. I decided that he must have turned off the lights to clean up without detection. He possibly realized that he'd been foolish for not drawing the curtains, not turning off the lights in the first place. Perhaps he'd struck his wife in a fit of passion, hadn't taken the time to properly plan his kill. Alternatively, I considered that he may have been sleeping soundly. He may have felt absolutely nothing about what he's done, may have been sleeping like a baby. I sailed around the edge of the property, moving on nimble feet with a gleeful grin on my face, gleefully anticipating my moment of heroism. I should clarify, There was nothing about the night's events to be celebrated. I was simply dreaming sweet dreams of capturing Mr. Ackhurst, becoming known as the courageous young man who had brought a killer to justice, a vigilante with not only a story to tell, but the capacity to tell it well. I was relieved to find that the side door already had a shattered window. There was no need to find a stealthy route of entry, no need to worry about being detected. I slid the door open, towed a heavy rock off the mat, and entered the lightless home. Fear gripped me as I caught about was well. I heard panicked movement upstairs, creaking floorboards, and a muffled voice. The patter of frantic footsteps traveled along the upstairs corridor, and then came the descending thuds of stairs groaning under the weight of the homeowner. "Mr. Ackhurst," I called. "It's over." The monster and I met in the dark entryway of his home. He eyed me fearfully, wondering why he'd been disturbed, wondering why the intruder was a 17-year-old boy, no doubt. Youth was the greatest mask I had. We're verging on adulthood, Gareth. People will stop giving us leeway, sooner or later. "Jim?" the man cried. "What are you doing at my house?" I did not falter for a moment, couldn't afford to falter when faced with a man taller and stronger than me. I had to focus on the plan, had to beat him with the strength of my mind, not my body. I would walk out of that cursed graveyard with his decapitated head in my hands, if necessary. The upstairs tap was running. I remember that. It was the only sound in the lightless house. I'd caught the man off guard, and that was the only advantage I had. With every passing second, that advantage was slipping away. The sound of running water drowned the crime, a terrible truth with such awful weight that I prayed it would sink far from view. Though I could not resist Gareth, could not resist telling you, such a legacy doesn't deserve to be buried. The man barreled forwards, and I held firm, rigidly sticking to the plan. Whatever my fate, I was determined to be remembered. I am no moron, of course. I did not enter the pitiful man's hovel without a weapon to wield. I pulled the stainless steel from my pocket as Mr. Ackhurst charged towards me, watery eyes emblazoned with something, a feeling I did not, or perhaps could not place, for his mind was a mystery to me. The emotion may have been fury, perhaps, a fearful fury. Those tears multiplied and cascaded when my blade punctured his abdomen. I barely even moved the blade. Mr. Ackhurst did a fine job of moving into it, and the lobby was so dark that the man had clearly not detected any glint of a steel edge, no foreboding sign of his impending doom. As his mouth opened, I twisted the knife, gutting him in a rushed attempt to prevent any retaliation. Repeated thrusts and turns of my blade quickly quelled any ideas he may have had. The man fought meekly, placing one hand on my neck in a meager attempt to muster a loose grip as the life quickly fleeted his body. And then the house was silent. I could have been more meticulous, could have chosen a better instrument, a better way to attack, but I survived. It was over. The story was strange, and not in a way that intrigued me. That was my first thought. I was terrified for a reason that seemed just out of grasp. But after an hour or so of repeatedly reading the second entry, I finally came to a conclusion. Jim, at the very least, wasn't telling the whole truth. And even after what I read in the final post, the whole truth is something I'm still trying to ascertain. I have more haunting questions than answers. Entry 3, July 8th, 2009. Hello, Gareth. You should know by now that I made this blog for you, only you. I hope that upon finishing my disturbing tale, you put it in the hands of those who might know what to do with it. Someday, I really do pray you read it. I'm sure you will. Today I finally alerted the authorities, a moment that should have been exhilarating, ruined by a terrifying development. It's currently 1 a.m, and I'm packing my bags. I must leave. It isn't safe for me here. You see, I failed. I didn't cover my tracks. I didn't eliminate the threat. I was a little off at school yesterday. You noticed that. You may be awful at responding to messages, but you're a good friend, Gareth. A very good friend. I've always known that. And it's why I'll never forget you. I do wish I could stay. Wish I could explain everything. But he's here. That's my fault. I was incredibly sloppy, and my heroic antics may have all been for naught. The man's brother visited. I came home from school, preparing to finally alert the police and tell them my brave story. But then I saw it, the car on the driveway, a blue Porsche that I didn't recognize. I immediately panicked, of course, because I hadn't finished the cleanup, and the scene in the white shots in the house didn't exactly look paint me in a favorable light. I rushed across the road, had to be quick, had to tidy up my mess before Mom and Dad came home. I beelined towards the side door, which was still a broken mess, swinging in the breeze. And there was a wailing voice emanating from the main hallway. I know. Why did I leave the body there in the early hours of yesterday morning? Well, I was interrupted. Don't think less of me for my stupidity, Gareth. Please, I was meticulous in every other regard. The Ackhursts didn't have friends or visitors. I thought it'd be safe to leave them there until the following evening. It was a foolish decision, but that doesn't make me a foolish man. I realized, upon entering the home, that I had very few options. Few reasonable options, I mean. What could I have done? Killed Mr. Ackhurst's brother, too. He was an innocent man. That wouldn't have painted me in a heroic light, and I accepted that as his eyes met mine. That was when I realized I had to run. I'm on the road as I type Gareth, jotting down my final thoughts, the conclusion to my frustratingly brief tale. I had hoped for a satisfying conclusion, but life sought to rewrite my story. How rude of it. The authorities have been notified, but I won't be there to tell the tale in person. Still, a hero does not act for glory. A hero is altruistic. That is how legacies are formed, right? And my legacy, whatever it may be, shall be eternal. You may think very little of those 3 posts. Without any context, I suppose the only horror to be gleaned from Jim's writings would be the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Ackhurst. But I think, even without context, that you likely feel what I feel. Something doesn't add up. You'd be right. Terror worked its way into my gut as I processed everything I'd read, comparing it with the events that I remembered from my childhood. The bodies of Jeffrey Ackhurst and Patricia Ackhurst were found in their home on July 8th, 2009. Town gossip, thanks to a few blabbermouth police officers, brought the finer details to light. Jeffrey's corpse was found in the entryway, as Jim had claimed. Patricia's corpse was found in the bathroom, also as he claimed. However, there is another piece of information worth noting. I thought it better for you to read Jim's 3 posts first. The police have always suspected Jeffrey's brother, Rudy Ackhurst, to be the killer of the couple. And what led them to this working explanation? Jeffrey's time of death was estimated to be an hour before Patricia's time of death. I kept thinking about that as I read Jim's disjointed account of events. Thought about how it didn't make sense that my friend would have been able to describe how Jeffrey felt whilst killing his wife. Thought more importantly about how it didn't make sense that Jim would have been able to see Mr. Ackhurst kill Mrs. Ackhurst. Jim was telling the truth in his second entry. He did kill Mr. Ackhurst, I have no doubt about that. But my friend couldn't have seen Patricia die in the upstairs bathroom because her husband was already dead. And if Jim weren't avenging the woman, why on earth did he savagely slaughter Jeffrey Ackhurst? I think I know. We all know, don't we? But I don't want to accept it. Just as I don't want to accept who really killed Patricia Ackhurst. For years, it was believed that Rudy Ackhurst had killed his brother and sister-in-law before kidnapping or murdering Jim Harlow for whatever reason. But it's clear that we've been believing a lie. I thought about the closing sentence in entry 3, the punchline, as my friend would call it. And my legacy, whatever it may be, shall be eternal. Jim was right. Given what he's done, he will be remembered. I gave this evidence to the police, and they've reopened the case. The town is alive with talk of the Ackhursts once more. I thought that telling the authorities would have put an end to this nightmare, other than the thoughts which plague my mind. But I saw something this morning, a figure watching me from a local bus stop. one who looked, to my eyes, like an older version of Jim Harlow. That could have been paranoia, but something terrifying confirmed it this evening. Something that prompted me to make this post. A handwritten note through my letterbox. It isn't kind to fib, Gareth. Shall I write your story? Dear friend, pen your closing chapter in a way that nobody will doubt. The more I think about my old childhood friend, the more I remember the oddities I overlooked for years, amplifying the quakes in my chest. I keep imagining awful scenarios. Jim slinking into my home, returning to silence me. And, given the man's creativity, I am haunted by the prospect of him fabricating a wonderful tale about my untimely end, one that would serve his legacy.